What's your I have to take one for the teen story? I was a freshman in high school and it was homecoming. Our class pulled a bad prank on this girl who had a learning disability and voted for her to be the freshman rep as a joke, and she won. Well, the guy that got voted to walk with her backed out the day before and I was second in line. Being a freshman, knowing it was a joke, and knowing I'd have to walk her down with everyone watching, I was mortified, but I did it. I remember my stepbrother giving me crap and laughing at me, and then my stepfather found out what I was going to do. He chewed my stepbrother out and was immensely proud of me. I don't think she ever figured out it was a joke, and she was so happy that night. It was probably the highlight of her high school years, honestly. Some 25 years later my dad ran into her parents and they still thanked me to him. You just never know whose life you might touch. Be kind. Was in a car ride with my GF and some family. My GF lets out a nasty fart and my uncle starts complaining about the smell. It was the first time my GF met these people and I figured it would be super awkward if they figured it was her. So I took responsibility for the fart. Besides some more complaints directed at me, nothing else happened. The fart was hella stinky, so I don't blame them for complaining at all. Friend PF mine got on a late night fight at a bar and was sent to the closest police station. Everyone left and I was left with him. Rode the police car with him and called a lawyer and helped through all the legal procedures to pay bail and get him out. Still had to get to work by 8 AM. I was at Universal in FL with my best friend and our 2 boyfriends, waiting in the line for the Hulk roller coaster. It was 97 degrees Fahrenheit and the air was like soup, and we had already waited in line for an hour. I was feeling a little overheated, but was ready to wait it out when I took a look at my best friend who looked white as a sheet, like she was about to faint. I finally called it and said, "Hey guys, I'm not feeling it. Steph, do you want to go grab food and shop in that store with the good HP stuff?" I could sense the immediate relief from her as we walked out of the line. Her BF is a Florida native, and she was trying to put on a brave face, but I knew 2 more minutes, and that chick would have passed the heck out. We ate ice cream, and shopped while we waited another hour for the guys to get through the line, to ride the 2-minute roller coaster. Totally worth it to take the week title for myself to bail. My friend picked out terrible bridesmaid dresses, if you can picture it. Structured goldenrod cheap transparent chiffon with a body clinging tank top slip the size of a napkin underneath. Sort of that twee shabby chic prairie style that was en vogue a decade ago. My husband called me and I quote, "Amish slut." All the bridesmaids hated them, but bride friend was type A and no one wanted to complain. I fell on my sword and begged her to let me pick something different because of my weight, as I was the chunkiest one in the party. I absolutely refused to stand in front of people in that handkerchief. She wanted everyone to match, so she switched to a much more flattering one. I got a group hug from all the bridesmaids in secret. It's been a decade, and she still brings it up occasionally that the first dress was fine and everyone else liked it. A bunch of friends and myself were going on an 8-mile hike during a group camping trip. Before we left, one of our friends kept voicing his skepticism about being able to complete an 8-mile hike. His girlfriend kept urging him to go because she didn't want to hang back with him. She wanted to hike, so he ends up going. About an hour and a half into the hike, we are going up a series of switchbacks and the dude just can't do it anymore. He tells us that he is going back. We all kind of look to his girlfriend to see if she is going to accompany him back, and she just turns around to keep moving forward. A couple of us were in the back kind of looking back towards him and then up towards the others who are continuing on, and then one of my other friends says, "Should someone go with him?" And we all kind of look at each other hesitantly. I finally jump in and say I will go back with him so that everyone else can keep going. I catch up to him and he says I didn't have to do that, but I tell him that I don't want him being alone all day. We make it back to camp and he immediately goes to take a nap, and I end up sitting at camp by myself for the next few hours until the rest of the people get back. I guess I should have listened to him when he said I didn't have to come back with him. I was in Vegas with some friends, and we were at a rooftop club getting bottle service. One of my friends Ed hooks up with a girl, let's call her Nancy. Ed and Nancy really hit it off and they go back to his room together at the end of the night. The next night, we are hanging out again and having dinner, and Ed has invited Nancy to join us. She does. So does her angry lesbian friend slash roommate Carol. There's a long backstory that I never really learned. Something about how Carol was divorcing her husband, hated men, was living with Nancy for the time being, and probably had an unrequited crush on Nancy, but I never got the details. Nancy was obviously looking to continue the previous night's activities with Ed, as was Addition. Carol, however, was bound and determined to prevent that from happening, so she'd invited herself along and wouldn't leave Nancy's side. In order to give Ed an opening, I started talking with Carol. We got into an involved discussion about the ongoing Winter Olympics and the suicidal nature of Luge and Skeleton. It was actually a fun conversation. But while we were talking, Ed and Nancy slipped away. When Carol noticed that they were gone, her demeanor immediately changed. She clammed up, and she left soon after. Ed thanked me profusely the next morning. My best friend convinced me have a couple of drinks together. Next thing you know, I'm carrying him on my back at 1 AM to his house. We were 16 at the time. Police came and arrested us. It was when quarantine first started in Greece. Nothing really happened with the cops. They just phoned our parents and waited. Both our parents came to the police station. They asked whose idea was it. I knew that if I told it was my friend's idea he would be drunk. So I just told them that it was mine. I got grounded for 2 weeks, and he got for 1. I actually told my father a while ago that it was his idea and I took the blame for him. He laughed and said my son is a loyal friend. But he was married and had 2 young children, who was unable to get away from his job, wife and kids. His wife is also a bit of a helicopter wife, if that makes sense. My buddy and I have a bond over baseball. Hadn't seen him in a long time, so we went to a Blue Jays game. During the game his wife constantly texted him reminding he had to come straight home. When was the game going to be over? My buddy stated it's a Saturday afternoon. I haven't seen you in ages, or been out in a while. I want to go to a pub after for drinks, but need an excuse that will give me an extra hour or 2. On Saturdays, the Jays would have Junior Jays Saturdays, where 45 minutes after the game, if you were 12 and under, you could wait in a long line and run the bases. I told my buddy to tell his wife that I was trying to hit on a hot single mom who had a baby, but also a 4-year-old who wanted to run bases, and offered to take the 4-year-old around the bases with the intent to get a number. Mission accomplished as we headed after the game for a couple beers. A month later I was at his house and the first thing his wife says to me, "You are such a pathetic sleazeball." Calling this a take one for the team moment feels insensitive, because I gained a wonderful friendship, but here goes. I work at a big company, and in a local team of about 90, one of my direct reports lost a long battle with cancer. I was close with him, and gave a eulogy at his funeral. Horribly sad. He had a wife and 2 daughters. He had a friend who I didn't know beyond her name, but I knew they were tight, because they always took breaks together. She happened to be off continent when he died. It was somewhat sudden, and missed his funeral. She wasn't a particularly warm person, and was a bit standoffish when I'd see her in communal office spaces. I have a busy life, and had trouble with the idea of supporting what might become an obligatory friendship, but she seemed different after his death. And so after about a month I sent her an email, and said something to the effect of, "I know we don't know each other well, but we both knew well. I don't want to be presumptuous, so feel free to ignore me entirely, but if you ever need a friend, I'm here." She responded and we became casual friends, and she ended up telling me that, in her words, she reached out to the universe that week for a reason not to take her own life. I guess my email arriving the next day was the sign. She has never said this, but I think she was pretty in love with our mutual friend, and he was her main social connection. She is a wonderful person and very kind and very committed to her relationships despite having only a few. She is fiercely loyal and defensive of her friends. I admire her greatly. We are not a match in terms of our interests or personality, and somehow I feel like a stand-in, there to get her through week after week, until she decides on her next direction. I'm happy to be there for her, and she teaches me a lot about myself, and she listens to me when I'm sad too. It's been a while, I should check in on her. We were 15 hours in our 2-event shift. Lots of clients, setup, moving around, etc. My watch recorded 14 miles of walking. It was also snowing. My 7 team members were barely walking straight and had knee pain, had to lie on the floor. By the end, anyway, both events were over and it's time for cleanup. The leader says only one person needs to stay to sweep, so the rest can go home. I'm in the military, so I volunteered. My joints hurt, but not as bad. They all hugged me on their way out, and I stayed an extra 90 minutes to clean up. When my loving and dear mother went to the hospital last month due to terminal brain cancer, only 2 people could visit for her entire stay due to COVID security. My father was one of the 2 and the last spot was between my sister and me. I'll let my sister have the last spot without debating or arguing. After 2 days of not being able to visit, they were able to convince the hospital management to make an amendment and let me in. Unfortunately, I missed out on 2 of the last 5 days she had left. Having a sleepover at a friend's house, like 5 to 6 of us. We started what was a babysitting group in school and all became close friends. Regular sleepovers at one friend's house. We would all sleep in her parents' bed since it was a king and would fit us all. Parents slept in the guest room. We wake up and someone had wet the bed. We didn't know who. It wasn't me. My friend's mom is livid. She has all of us stand and tries to figure out who wet the bed. First she asked. No one said anything. Checked our pajamas and it was inconclusive. So she gave us an ultimatum. If no one admits to it, no more sleepovers. After a couple seconds I say it was me. I was punished pretty bad. Mostly for not owning up to it originally. Even though it wasn't even me. And every time I slept over after that I had to wear a diaper. But we still got to have regular sleepovers, which was worth it. A bit of backstory. I was a paid staff at a well-known UK charities furniture shop. Most of our volunteers were disabled in some way from not noticeable to pretty obvious. A lot of the customers were low income / Eastern European immigrants, which is never an issue, but a few tried to take the piss. One volunteer in particular was absolutely lovely and such a sweetie, but somehow he always ended up in trouble and was on the brink of being asked not to return. He wasn't a bad guy, he just got taken advantage of and didn't see bad in anyone. By this point I kept him close to me so I could help him out. Also, he was the only volunteer that was 100% reliable and guaranteed to turn up every day. Anyway, one day he was on the till while I filled out paperwork for delivery / collection of the customer to get through the queue quickly because it was a rare but busy day where we were non-stop. A Eastern European man came up and it was a large order for us, £500, and he paid cash. But he kept swapping the notes about, so he gave it in £20 / 10 / 5 notes, but then would swap the £5s for a £10 or £20 for £5s etc, and eventually finished effing about, and volunteer must have lost track somewhere, and because by that point it was stupidly busy and the queue had built up from this dude pissing about, he didn't double check and just accepted it was still the correct amount. That night we, paid staff, were cashing up, and we are £100 short. There's 5 of us, and we all take turns counting out just to make absolutely sure, because this is a big amount that would need to be reported. Everyone's sitting there wondering what the F happened, and as I was on the desk pretty much all day, because I was the one with legible handwriting even when rushed, so of course it fell on me. I could have thrown volunteer under the bus, but instead I told them half-truth about the guy effing about with payment. But instead of saying volunteer had dealt with it, I said I had. I explained what dude was doing, and said about how we were so rushed that I must have just counted wrong when he was finally done, because we were so busy, and I just wanted to get the queue down. Luckily we were all pretty close and always covered each other within reason. I told them I'd be right back, went to the bank, took the £100 out, and put it in the till, so we didn't have to report it and get investigated and re-eamed the new one by the area manager. I also never let that volunteer near the till again, just to be on the safe side. My ex-girlfriend and I worked at a bar in Montreal. She was a waitress, and I was bartender. Once in a while a bunch of rich dudes from the States would come up and flaunt their money to the girls we worked with, buying champagne and such. One night she was serving them, and I got cut early and was waiting until she was done, and those dude insisted on giving her drinks. She was coming down with a cold and didn't want to drink, so she kept feeding me drinks intended for her. Long story short, there ended being roofies in the drink and I blacked out and I woke up on my apartment floor and my GF on the couch. I'm glad I took that one for her. One time in college, we all ended up at my buddy's parents' house partying. It was a Christian college, and we had to get creative like that to have a party. Luckily, this guy was from the same town as the college. There were like 20 to 25 of us in the garage smoking weed. I'd picked up this huge, glow-in-the-dark bong over spring break. I was just packing bowl after bowl and passing it around this huge circle in the garage. We're all baked and having a great time. I pack a freshie and walk over to whoever was next. As I'm about to hand them the bong, I see an ex-football teammate who's now a cop open the door to the garage from inside the house. I'm like, fuck. I sit down the bong and this guy ushers all inside the house. You see, this house was owned by the chief of police and he'd given the cops instructions to keep an eye out for any parties while they're away on vacation. He'd even given them a key to get into the house on their own if needed. So we all go inside and all of our info is taken down by the cops. We're all going to be screwed because this college has an honor code and we're all in violation of it. As the next few days go by, everyone is freaking out about what will happen. Will we get expelled, suspended, community service? One by one people start getting called into the dean's office. He's trying to break people down individually so that our stories don't match up. At some point at least one person decided to say it was all my fault. I brought the bong and weed and I was the one smoking. The reality was that yes, I did bring the bong and weed, but everyone was smoking. Now a few of my buddies that were there start asking me what I'm going to say when I get called up. I assure them that I'll stick to the main story. The next day I get the call to be in the dean's office at 9 AM. As I'm walking there I start thinking about my friends that are seniors and about to graduate. Would they be expelled and not get their degree? What about the girl that I brought there and who I was meeting? Would her parents ever let me into their house again? If the word is that I caused her to get suspended, I get to the dean's office and I'm ushered right into his office. There's like 5 or 6 people in there. I instantly make up my mind. Hello Edward, please take a seat. I sit down. We have a few questions we'd like to ask you about the party. I just decide enough is enough and blurt out, it was all my weed. It was my bong. Nobody else needs to get into trouble. Just me. They're all taken aback, but they look at each other without saying a word and all kind of nod at one another. The dean says, well, that's very honorable of you, Edward. I then tell them I'm going to transfer to a big state college and I'll be out of their hair. They agree to let me stay the next few days to pack my things and say my goodbyes. Everyone that was there walks with zero punishment. The seniors graduate. I get to keep meeting that girl. I transfer that summer to my new school and graduate from there eventually.